Coming up on today's show, Xbox announces closures of multiple studios in the latest round of layoffs. Sony does an about-face with Helldivers 2 PSN requirements, and Nintendo is finally talking about Switch 2. What's good, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the What's Good Games podcast, your source for video game news, commentary, analysis, and the funny stuff every Friday. I'm one of your hosts, Andrea Renee, joined by Mrs. Riana Manuel-Peña.
I'm marking myself safe from the Drake and Kendrick beef, and also happy to be here today.
Oh my goodness. So I haven't been following what's happening with the beef, only that the beef exists, and apparently it's the best publicity stunt they've done because everybody is talking about them in their music right now.
It is. It's funny to see all of the people on social trying to draft off of the beef, and like all of the different corporate accounts that are trying to, jump into it. I'm like, yeah, it's just stop. Let it be for us. Just let it be for the people, please. It's too much.
Yes. Well, I do look forward to checking out Blessing and Roger's video over at Kind of Funny, because they apparently do a very in-detail recap of what's going on with the beef and where the beef has come from. But that isn't about video games, Rihanna. That is about music, and we've got a lot of news to talk about. Some of it is super sad, and some of it is kind of cool, and then some of it's a little bit in between. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about some video games, because I know we've missed hands-on in the last couple of episodes, and talking about the game that apparently hundreds of thousands of people are playing, Hades 2. But before we get to that, thank you to this month's super producers, Bored Ape Gamers Club, Faris Attieh, Joshua Franklin, Justin Foshee, and Punkdefied. And thank you to everybody who showed up at our 7-year anniversary stream last week. We had such a great time, and thank you for supporting us and being active in the chat and dropping your memories and some of your favorite moments. And also a big thank you and shout out to our homegirl and co-founder, Christine Steimer, for swinging by the stream and doing a really fun segment. I'm going to be uploading that as a standalone podcast episode, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Lots of smutty book talk, which is, both exciting and titillating at the same time.
Good word.
Yeah, titillating. I think it's a perfect word for smutty book talk. And thank you to people who have left us new 5-star reviews and have done the migration from Patreon to Supercast. I'm going to keep beating that drum because apparently a bunch of our patrons don't know the migration is over. No, it's underway still. I'll be posting additional details about that, everybody. But listen, we've got a lot of news to get into, so I'm just going to head right into our lead story of the week, which is such a disappointing turn after having such an exciting conversation about what Xbox is up to last week in lieu of their Summer Games Showcase confirmation and speculation about what they could be bringing. This week, they announced they're closing multiple studios, including Redfall developer Arkane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks, and more, in devastating cuts within Bethesda Gameworks. Rihanna, I've been having trouble with this story.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm going through the stages of grief. Like, I'm in disbelief, I'm angry, I'm sad, I haven't yet come to acceptance, but I'm kind of there.
Yeah, it's tough with this one, especially since we've gotten, and I'm sure, we'll reference this in the story that you can read out in just a moment, but we've gotten so many confirmations that this was not going to happen directly from executives at Xbox, and we believed them, right? Like, that's the hard part. It's when your best friend lets you down, kind of the feeling how at least how I'm processing my grief.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's worked at Xbox and somebody who's a big fan of a lot of the stuff that they do, I'm really disappointed today, and I don't even really understand why it's happening, which is the hard part, right? Like, the confusion makes it even more difficult.
Yes. So we're going to get into a little bit of that, maybe try to reckon with why it's happening. Not that the answers or even the theories about why it's happening are going to be good ones in the sense of like, but really that's your reason though, shrug. Okay, let's get into it. So I'm going to go with IGN's story because they were the lead outlet to break this news and come out with details this week. Microsoft has closed a number of Bethesda studios, as I just mentioned, including Alpha Dog Games, maker of mobile game Mighty Dune, and Roundhouse Studios will be absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online developer ZeniMax Online Studios. Microsoft, currently valued at over $3 trillion with a T dollars, did not say how many staff will lose their jobs, but significant layoffs are inevitable. IGN has asked Bethesda for comment. Microsoft declined to expand further when contacted. On Redfall, the disastrous vampire co-op game that will now not received promise updates, including an offline mode and new characters DLC, has ended all development on the game. Microsoft said that Redfall will remain online to play and it will provide make-good offers for those who bought the Hero DLC. There are additional details on how to get that refund and how to process that if you are one of those people affected, so I highly encourage you to seek that out. Arkane Lyon, which is working on Marvel's Blade, survived the call, as does Bethesda Game Studios, of course, the famous studio behind Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, and Starfield, who's having a banger of a moment right now because of the Fallout Amazon television series. Machine Games, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, is coming later this year, also survives the call, as does Doom developer id Software. In an email sent to staff by Matt Booty, the head of Xbox Game Studios, Microsoft blames the cuts on a, quote, reprioritization of titles and resources. The email was verified by IGN and reads below. Now, I'm not going to read this whole email, Rihanna, because a lot of it is fluffy fluff. But basically, it's Matt Booty saying, here's who's going to close, here's what they were working on. And then at the bottom of it, it says, with this consolidation of our Bethesda studio teams so that we can invest more deeply in our portfolio of games and new IP, a small number of roles across select Bethesda publishing and corporate teams will also be eliminated. Something that kind of got lost in the news is that there are people within Bethesda proper that are also losing their jobs. Those whose roles will be impacted will be notified, but the things that I highlighted out of Matt Booty's email was, these changes are not a reflection of the creativity and skill of the talented individuals at these teams or the risk they took to try new things. And I'm going to stop here for a moment because this is something that we've talked about with several of these layoff stories that have happened so far in 2024 about how unfair it feels that some teams who are doing really brilliant work are not safe from cuts. And it leaves us the question of, well, what would make them safe from being cut from a corporation that is profitable? And in fact, not just profitable, but one of the top 2 most profitable companies in the entire world. And so I don't think we're going to have an answer to that, but we're going to pin that conversation. The other thing I highlighted from this paragraph before we stop and talk about it for a minute is, we are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games. I think that to me is like the sting, the knife, the knife in the back. That's the worst one. And it's so like I made the joke about Cindy on the comms team. But like corporate comms is a hard thing. And they knew when they push send on this email that this email would make its way onto the internet relatively quickly and that people would be looking at it and scrutinizing what he said. And I think that like there's never going to be a good way to say, hey, we're closing studios. It's always going to be like people are going to be angry and upset. Right. But this just rings, like you said, so hollow, and I don't know how to reckon it.
It's really tough, especially because, and I know we're going to circle back to the making sure people feel like they can be risk takers. It's really frustrating when you outright say, or a company outright says, you're not popular enough. You know, it just sucks,
we like
right?
You, but we don't really like you. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like, and obviously Hi-Fi Rush is definitely the darling that most people are pointing to because it was critically acclaimed, was a huge highlight for Xbox for first party portfolio for 2023. It was a shadow drop that was very exciting. It's something very different for Bethesda, and you know, it felt very much like the promise of Game Pass come to light, right? Like, this is a game that many people would never try. It seems like such a random shot in the dark from this developers especially, and it just hit. And It scratched all the itches for people. It's, you know, a combat rhythm game that it was universally loved and successful commercially, right? It introduced a new world, it had this really interesting mechanic that was executed perfectly, and there was a lot of excitement for potential additional content and it coming to other platforms, which it allegedly still will be. But it's just really frustrating when there's something that did take a risk and did meet its goals and did satisfy the audience, and still that studio does not get a chance to take another swing in this universe or do something similar in another genre.
Yeah,
it really, really sucks.
It does. And I think people keep pointing to this with good reason, because so much of the leadership at Xbox kept celebrating this game. It was this cool shadow drop that they had never really done, and it was such a departure from Tango. And Xbox's Aaron Greenberg tweeted out that Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. And Bethesda and Tango had celebrated over 2 million players within the first month of releasing the game, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so this sounds like, by all accounts, a win. So unless something really catastrophic was happening behind the scenes at the studio that
which is very possible,
has not come to light, which so far from what I've been reading online from developers within the studio, that doesn't sound like the case. But it's like, well, as a developer, how do you look at this? If you were somebody at one of the many studios underneath the Microsoft umbrella now, because of these wild mergers and acquisitions that have been happening over the last 5 years with Microsoft, how do you not be fearful of the work you're doing being never good enough? And even if it is good enough, it doesn't matter. Maybe somebody at the top of the food chain just decided that your brand of creativity is not the focus of the studio going forward. And like, it's so hard, because I hear people's argument of, well, they had too many studios. There was always going to be redundancy cuts. We knew there would be more. And I was like, yeah, but they already laid off 1,900 people at the beginning of the year, lest we forget.
Yeah.
You know, that happened. So
like we got those cuts.
And then it's like, well, this is why it's been so hard for me to kind of articulate my thoughts on this. And y'all know that we're big fans of Xbox here at What's Good Games. We talk very positively about them because they've been so supportive of us as a brand. And I've been so supportive of their mission and so supportive of Phil Spencer's leadership. And I still am, for the record. All of this talk of like, should Phil step down? Is like, get out of here. No, Phil is doing great.
No,
he was probably given an impossible task by Satya or other leadership within Microsoft. And he was like, I don't want to do this. And he probably got overruled, knowing Phil's passion for this business and the teams that he works with. And it's like, so who do you point the finger at then? Like, who's to blame for this? Come forward. Scapegoat? Like,
I mean, most likely some faceless people, some person, or the shareholders.
It's
like
Bob
the shadow
marketing. It's always Bob.
Theater of heads. Like, God.
Yeah,
it's tough because there's really no way to engage with the decision makers. And you know, there's a very small group of people in the grand scheme of things who are very frustrated and expressing that frustration. And we know what'll happen. We'll move on. Like, there will be some other news. We'll see some other thing, and the attention will get placed elsewhere. And there are incredible groups of people who can't work together anymore. And it's just unfortunate. And we're losing so much talent and so much experience and so much potential right now across, obviously, this group of developers from Xbox, but across the entire industry. And other industries are feeling it as well. Like, it's not just games. And I tweeted about this yesterday, and recording today on Wednesday. Like where does it end? Like, we can't have exponential growth every single year for every industry. It is not possible. No. So at what point do we stop letting people go because they're not making enough more money than they did last year? You know, like at some point it has to level out, or at least just like pause and just move along with inflation. Like, it's okay to just make as much as you did last year plus inflation and additional costs. Like, it's okay.
I think that's the rub here. And some of the sentiment we've seen in the incredible outpouring of emotion and opinions about this news, I don't think anyone faults Microsoft for managing the business that they see fit. I think where people fault them is that they are an incredibly wealthy company that has deep, deep coffers of reserve money that could weather a storm and save these creative teams and say, hey, these are assets that we spent a lot of money and time and legal resources to acquire. So why don't we hang on to those and not close them? Because once we get through this storm, and it's going to cost us, a couple bucks, maybe more than a couple, maybe a couple $100 million, but it turns out they can afford it. But they'll be valuable and worth it. And that, I think, is the part that's just getting impossible to accept. And we talked about that with Take-Two Interactive when they made the cuts last week, how like they have the money to sustain that. Sony Interactive Entertainment has money to sustain that. And it's like, when, like you said, when does it end? So I do want to bring up some of the money since we're talking about that right now. So I looked up some context because I'm sure a lot of people were Googling Microsoft profits 2024, as our good friend Adam Boyes did. He tweeted that they made over $22 billion in profit just from this most recent quarter. And by the way, that's not revenue, that's profit, meaning like after they spent all the money doing and running the business and everything else, like that's just like the extra they got to keep. Over 20 billion for 3 months, everybody. From GeekWire, they wrote an article about the second quarterly report for Microsoft. It included effects of its record-setting acquisition, of course, of the formerly independent game developer Activision Blizzard King, which is a huge story from last year and is a huge driver of their overall revenue. Xbox and content services revenue grew 62%, and gaming revenue as a whole grew 51%, both of which were primarily credited to Activision. By the way, that's $5.4 billion for the quarter just for the gaming division of Microsoft. $5.4 billion. At the same time, Xbox hardware revenue declined 31%. And the report notes that the overall impact of the Activision acquisition includes a $350 million loss in operating income. Because turns out they had a kind of rough legal battle getting Activision on board. That loss includes a series of adjustments for the movement of Activision content across the ecosystem, as many of Activision's current titles have needed updates to bring them into compliance with Xbox first-party practices. And they conclude with it's illustrative of what was actually at stake for Microsoft over the course of the last year as it defended its Activision acquisition in the courts in the US and the UK. Without Activision's software lineup on its side, the financial story might have been much worse for Xbox. And I think that that's worth noting because we know that Xbox as a brand within Microsoft has been struggling. Microsoft proper, doing just fine, has been doing just fine for decades. They good. But Xbox has kind of had these ups and downs with their branding over the years, and Nintendo and PlayStation have been having some really good back-to-back years, right? PS4 really crushed it that generation. I think it's no secret that Xbox One really lagged behind. Nintendo came out with Switch, and what we're going to cover in headlines is having a record-breaking sales period with Switch, which is awesome. So it's like, where does that leave Xbox? We come back again, over and over again, to Xbox Game Pass and what's happening with Game Pass. And we're seeing a lot of stories right now, Rihanna, about like people indicating that Game Pass isn't as healthy as Microsoft indicates that it is, and that what's going to happen in Game Pass now. They've shuttered all these studios that were making some of these smaller projects that people were subscribing for. What do you think is going to be the impact for Game Pass?
I mean, unfortunately, the public support for it is definitely going to take a big hit. I spoke earlier about the promise of it coming true with Hi-Fi Rush, and if that doesn't do enough to move the needle where Xbox needs it to land, then how much more resourcing can they pour into it? Like, how many more ID at Xbox games are we going to see highlighted? How many more smaller studios are we going to see coming on and putting their games in the Game Pass for that increased discoverability? Like, it really worries me because it is such a great product and a really great value for the consumer. And there's a lot of non-great consumer value products out there, and we're being, we're as a society, we're kind of suffering like death by a thousand cuts with all these subscriptions that we're engaging with in order to gain access to content that we could not access otherwise in some cases. And definitely in the case of Game Pass, this is how people afford their hobby, right? This is how people pay for their escape. This is how people connect with their friends and family, is through this very predictable, relatively low cost every month, and they can play with their friends across the world. And if that goes away, it really worries me for the community of video games. Like that, like we've met because of games. I met my husband because of games. Like all my best friends I met because of games. And if this isn't something that is sustainable from a business model standpoint, I'm really sad about what happens when it goes away, because if it's not going to make money, it's not going to stick around. And I really don't like that. That's the fact,
Yeah. And I think the thing I'm trying to figure out is in this statement that we got in Matt Booty's email about the increasing capacity for investments in other part of the portfolio and focusing on priority games. It's like, but what about those studios and the decisions that are happening within those? I look to a game like Halo 5, or I look to a game like Halo Infinite, how that game really struggled and had a famously large development budget with several points of mismanagement, several delays, increased development costs, and so Halo just keeps spending with an unlimited checkbook that they can draft from. And because other studios aren't 343 or aren't Halo, aren't Master Chief reps, then the creative work that they're doing, no matter how celebrated or how successful it is, gets cut. And I'm like, how do you reckon that? How do you answer that, right? And there's no good answer, right? Because then you say, well, what about the people at 343 that need their jobs? And it's like, yeah, no, those are real people too. So it's like, how do you decide which game is more important than the others? And it's like, I think what we've noticed over and over again, and the conversation that keeps coming up, is not only like, what is the metric for success that we can actually point to and go, look, it was successful, versus when do people actually have to own the consequences of their failings, right? Like, we always knew that something was going to happen with Arkane Austin after Redfall's failure. But the idea that you close a whole studio because they had one game go badly is sort of a wild notion of like, hey, that's not a good solution.
And especially when we know at this point from different reportings and, the conversations that even I'm privy to with the development studio, is they didn't want to make the game that way. like there were outside forces encouraging them to make games as a service fit into what could have been a really interesting, Arkane joint, right? And that's the sort of like the extra bitter coffee that comes along with this terrible, terrible breakfast. Because that's not even the one they wanted to do, and they had to go out on it. Like, you want to go out on something you believe in if you're gonna get cut, and sadly that's what Tango's probably feeling right now. Like, it's just bad all around, honestly.
Yes.
And you included this tweet from Denge Bakaba, who's working on the Marvel Blade game, I believe, and I would love for you to tell me your thoughts on it, because I feel like he really encapsulated the lament of the people who are in it right now.
Yes. So at D Bakaba on X is the co-creative director at Arkane Lyon. So I saw some outlets mistakenly talking about how Arkane is gone, and that's not the case. Arkane is very much still part of Bethesda and part of Xbox and Microsoft Game Studios. That just the Austin office is the one that was shuttered. So he wrote on X, "This is absolutely terrible. Permission to be human. To any executive reading this, friendly reminder that video games are an entertainment cultural industry, and your business as a corporation is to take care of your artists and entertainers and help them create value for you. Don't throw us into gold fever gambits. Don't use us as straw men for miscalculations, blind spots. Don't make our work environments Darwinist jungles. You say we make you proud when we make a good game. Make us proud when times are tough. We know you can. We've seen it before. And I pulled this because not only is it from a studio who's been directly affected, and Harvey Smith's sentiments are also like really, really hard to read. They're kind of, it's sad. A lot of it's just sad. But I appreciated that he felt confident enough to say this without fear of losing his job, of saying like, hey, like, it's not fair that creatives who are doing everything you've asked of them have to suffer the consequences when you decide to take a gamble and you don't even consult us about it. And it's our studio and our creative, and then you tell us what our marching orders are. And even if we fulfill the marching orders exactly as you directed them to us, it still won't matter if it's not good enough by some arbitrary metric that someone in finance has made up. And I'm like, yeah, you should be angry about that.
Yeah, it's completely unfair, and it's so unsustainable, right? Like Gary Whitta and the folks over at Kind of Funny Games cast were talking about it as well, and he really drove the point home that like you can't create good product or good art if you're terrified of losing your job every day, even if you do it well. Like, that's not a place where you can be creative. That's not a place you can be productive. Like, people who are at fear of losing their jobs don't do the best work that they can do. Like, this is in any industry, in any position, like we've been saying, like this is not sustainable. And it I don't know what will turn this around. Like how do we fix this? Like, what do we do? What do we do?
Yeah, it's
what do we do?
I honestly don't know. I think like the light at the end of the tunnel is that there's thankfully still a lot of investment happening in video games despite all of these really awful negative stories that we've been talking about every week. If you guys missed my interview with Joni Crowd from last week, because it was after Britt and I's conversation about what happened, the fun Xbox news that we had last week, I really encourage you to go back. She talks so much about the importance of the resources within the video games industry that are available for people, and some of the really key factors about what happens when you go through a layoff, and like the mental process of mourning for your job and dealing with your mental health, and how it's so important to take care of yourself after that, and what we can do as an industry to kind of collectively come together about that. So lots of really fantastic nuggets from Joni in that interview. But it's like, I don't know that there's going to be like a fix for this until the overall corporation structure, particularly in the United States or really globally, changes. This idea of we need to stop chasing these impossible profitability percentage margins at the cost of people's livelihoods, at the cost of people's health care here in the United States, the cost of people's ability to send their kids, with a lunchbox full of food, at the cost of people's health care for their children or their daycare or their ability to put gas in their car. It's just like, it's really just, it's a lot. It really just like really kind of falls all down on you sometimes. And this week was one of those weeks. And I know that our show is really focused about positivity, and we really try to be that escapism. And if this is really bumming you out, please just use the timestamps to skip right ahead to Riana talking about Hades 2, because that will uplift you. But we had to talk about this. We could not talk about it. It's just a bummer. Makes me sad. Makes me real sad.
Makes me real sad too.
And apparently there's rumblings from another report on Bloomberg that Xbox isn't done, that more cuts are happening. And I'm like, what? Again? Round 3? Seriously? Man, it's like, it's gonna be hard. I'm not even gonna mince words. Like, we're so looking forward to seeing the team at Xbox that we love to work with when we go to the Summer Games Showcase in a month. But it's going to be hard not to be like, bro, what the fuck?
And
What the fuck?
to their credit, I doubt it's any one of their decisions,
It's
right? Like, I'm
literally
sure
zero of their
they're
decisions.
all just as bummed out as we are right now.
I'm sure they're all just as angry too.
And angry too, and maybe even a little fearful, right? Because at this point, it's hard to feel safe. So, like, my heart goes out to everybody impacted, obviously. My heart goes out to anybody feeling survivor's guilt right now, because that's another part of this. And all the people who have to take on additional workload or join new teams and uproot whatever they need to uproot in their lives or their daily functions. Like, I am sorry that this is happening to you, because it's just not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Satya, you got money. Just spend some of it. What you sitting on it for?
Just a little bit. Just a little.
Tango? Really, Tango? Just sad. Sad.
Oh, Chai.
On that note.
Wait, cat. Oh,
I know. It was so good. So good. Okay, everybody. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have some more positive news. Trust me.
thank God.
I promise you, it's going to be good. But for now, take a listen to this ad, and we'll be right back. Let's get into some headlines, starting with a controversy not nearly as big as the one we were just discussing, but one worth discussing nonetheless. Amid intense fan backlash, Riana, Sony has reversed its Helldivers 2 PSN requirements. Tell me all about it.
Honestly, this one is a little bit like I'm on two sides of this one, because on the one hand, I'm so excited for the outcome, but on the other hand, oh no, internet mob working. Like, that's bad.
Yes,
but,
yes, exactly.
Let's get into the details. So last Friday, Sony Interactive Entertainment announced that players would soon be required to link a PSN account to play the viral hit shooter on PC. And they noted that it was always going to be a requirement, but they delayed the linking due to some launch issues. Maybe that could have been communicated a little bit more clearly. Mm-hmm. Over 200,000 Steam users took to the platform to post negative reviews on the storefront, swinging the public perception of the game to mostly negative. Ouch. Many asked for refunds as the game was pulled from sale in countries where PSN is not available, and many are getting them even if they are far beyond the usual time limit of the hours played. And Sony swiftly reacted with this statement. Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6 update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. Sony stated that it was still learning what is best for PC players and calling the recent spate of feedback invaluable. It then thanked everyone for their, quote, continued support of Helldivers 2, if that's what you want to call it, and before promising to keep us updated on their future plans. Never has a cry of for democracy felt so on the mark.
I had to add that.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Honestly, the story is great. Like, there's so many levels to this. It's highs and lows.
Yes. So let's talk about the low, and then we'll end with the high.
Yeah.
So the low was that there were over 200,000 people who were so upset about it that they went and changed the review on Steam. So that's bad, right? Because the developers don't deserve that heat for something that is not their fault. And something that was published on the game page for anybody who is buying the game to see when they bought the game. So let's make sure we know that. This is not the first time
there.
And won't be the last that Sony Interactive Entertainment requires users to link their PSN account when buying a Sony exclusive game on Steam. So first off, if you didn't read it and didn't see it, that part's on you. But what's not on you is if you live in a country that allowed you to buy the game and then does not have PSN support or access, and then took away your access for a game you paid. That is not cool, bro.
Very not cool.
It's also like, yo, Sony, feels like you should have known that was going to be a fucking problem.
It's like, who in the release management team forgot to toggle off the different countries?
Well, it's like, or you waive the requirement for users who are buying the version of the game in that country, or who are based in that country. It's just like there's ways to fix it. So it's kind of
Clearly.
it's just so listen, let me tell you. Publishing games is a difficult business. Entitlements, digital or otherwise, is complicated. And I understand like why the linking and the account management is something that all of the publishers are doing, right? This isn't just PlayStation, by the way. Like almost everybody does this now.
Yeah,
But
they want your data.
it's just all about communication. And they clearly failed at communicating about this in a really catastrophic way. And I had tweeted earlier this week that I really hope that people are going to go back and change the review now that Sony has fixed it. And we have seen many people, thankfully, going and changing their review. But let's be honest. Not everybody is going to go and change their review like they're supposed to because they're lazy. Like some of them just can't be bothered. Maybe some of them are going to be salty and bitter about it, even though the change never came to pass. Right.
Right.
And that to me is like the real like womp womp moment about this. And that sucks.
Yeah, that really does suck. And the developer outright said like, hey, we don't want this either. Right. So it's no one's fault per se that this wasn't what everybody wish it was, where, you know, it's a free reign game and you pay once and you can play it however you like. Like that's just not the reality when it's an exclusive. It's just not. So that part of it is understandable. But as you said, communication is key in any relationship. Just over communicate.
It sure is. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yes.
So people know.
I'm glad that the team at Arrowhead is going to bounce back from this, and hopefully the game can continue on and still be this really fun moment. But man,
yeah,
growing pains.
It sucks. It's also really interesting, just like social experiment wise, to see what happens when a game that's all about like international groups of people coming together for an online cause
and
goes
all
into
about,
real life.
Like, corporations too. Like it's just
right?
so
like,
on the nose.
It's so meta. Like I enjoy that aspect of the story. But take down your negative reviews if you really don't feel that way anymore, please.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you made the review negative purely because of this PSN issue, then like you have no reason to leave your negative review up. They fixed it.
Yeah.
So like
Go swap
also remember that the review affects the developer. Daddy Sony don't care. He's not going to be affected. His business is going to keep rolling on. So like help them out. Go back and change your review. Take the time. It matters. From one small business to another. Arrowhead, we see you. All right. Next story. Now moving into a little fun Nintendo block of multiple headlines, but wanted to start with, everybody hold on to your butts. Nintendo has finally acknowledged the existence of Switch 2.
Amazing.
It's happening. After financial results were published earlier this week, we got a tweet confirming that, yes, the successor to the Nintendo Switch is in fact a real thing. According to a tweet on the Nintendo account, this is Furukawa, president of Nintendo. It read, "We will make an announcement about the successor." This is also, by the way, let me aside, this is translated from Japanese.
Right.
The tweet was in Japanese. This is the inline translation. So I'm just going off what the internet said. "We will make an announcement about the successor to the Nintendo Switch within the first fiscal year. It will have been over 9 years since we announced the existence of the Nintendo Switch back in March 2015. What is time? We will be holding a Nintendo Direct this June. Ooh, exciting. Regarding the Nintendo Switch software lineup for the latter half of 2024. But please be aware that there will be no mention of the Nintendo Switch successor during that presentation."
Boo, tomato, boo.
Throw tomatoes. The fiscal year he's referring to, of course, ends in March 2025. So we've got a ways to go before we could see any actual news about this. Rumors, of course, have been swirling for years about what the features of the new hardware might be, including a larger 8-inch screen that would be LCD versus OLED, magnetic Joy-Cons, and, of course, the pack-in title of Metroid Prime 4. Oh, wait, I made that last one up. But remember when you used to get a free game with your console? Wouldn't that be cool to bring back?
That would be sweet. I think Nintendo is just just silly enough to do that and just to take us back to old times.
Honestly,
But yeah, I joke when I say boo hiss. Obviously, take your time, make your thing the way you want to make it, whatever. But I just want to hear about it. Just want to hear about it. That's all.
I think Nintendo is doing a really smart thing, but kind of just like they're doing I'm going to lean back in my rocker chair or in my weird office chair that fully leans back and be like, I'm just going to watch the drama between Sony and Microsoft play out and see what happens and where things are going. Meanwhile, we're just going to look at our big pile of Scrooge McDuck money.
Yeah.
I feel like things are pretty good because also revealed in the financial results that were released this week, Nintendo expects the Switch to overtake the DS in lifetime sales. I know, right? Nintendo expects the Switch to sell another 13.5 million units during the financial year that's coming, enough that will overtake the Nintendo DS to become the company's best-selling platform of all time. The Switch's current total is now 141.32 million units sold. Hot on the heels of the DS, which ended its run with 154 million. But will it ever overtake the king of the consoles, PlayStation 2, and its 160 million units sold? Maybe. But unlikely, given that they just released two of the major first-party titles last year, Tears of the Kingdom and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. What do they got in their pocket that could potentially boost them? Probably not a lot. But Rihanna, maybe this next title would just do it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Nintendo World Championship NES Edition has been announced for the Switch. Yay! Okay, so there's a new trailer featuring a 2017 live broadcast host, Andrea and Riana.
Who, me?
And who, you? And you detailed the game, which features over 150 challenges from across 13 different NES games. This is great. You've spent like a whole year playing this. There's a speedrunning single-player mode and World Championship mode with global online leaderboards. Very exciting and impressive for Switch. Plus, it wouldn't be a Nintendo game without a party mode for 8 local players. And this is out on July 18th, so we don't even have to wait that long.
I know. This was
exciting.
This was such a fun announcement. Thank you to everybody who tagged me in this. There was a lot of people who were like, oh my gosh, Andrea's in the trailer. As I tweeted, one of the amazing highlights of my career. Like, working with Nintendo was a dream come true, and being able to host such a tentpole event for them, something that is just such a magical experience, like really, really amazing experience for me and all the players. If you guys missed the trailer, several of the former players appear, a couple of the former champions appear, and it's just a really cool callback to this really awesome event that Nintendo used to throw. And this, I think people were sort of hoping this was there's a new like World Championship event happening, but maybe it will happen in 2025 when Switch 2 or whatever Nintendo is going to call the next iteration of their hardware is released, because that feels to me like a really big moment. Because when I hosted the Nintendo Worlds, it was when Switch was just being launched and Breath of the Wild was not a thing yet that people were playing. And one of the
That's so weird.
and one of the challenges was this Breath of the Wild challenge, and it was such a cool moment. And yeah,
yay!
Well,
it's so great to see you.
I guess technically it was after Breath of the Wild. It was before the next Mario game came out. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a really fun news story for the week.
It is. And Nintendo knows how to get us in the nostalgia feels for sure. Like they keep twisting that knife and emptying our wallets. Thanks, Nintendo.
Yeah, man. I think that's so smart that they made this the NES edition specifically.
Yeah.
Because it's going to hit people like us who are like, that was my console. That was the console I started playing games on. It's the one I have the most memories on. And thinking about the World Championship just reminds you of being a kid and really loving those moments and how important gaming was to so many of our childhood. And, they just always be like, hey, I heard that you hadn't opened your wallet for us recently. So we brought you another nostalgia hit. Let's go.
They know what they're doing. And yes, it's my first
Right.
console. I'm looking at it right now. I have it up on my shelf.
Oh, you have your original one?
I do. Do you want to see it? Here, I can grab it.
Of course, of course I want to see. Well, listen, there's no judgment on the dust here.
All right, for folks watching on YouTube.
Ah, there it is, in all of its glory. That's amazing.
Yellow.
That's what
Very yellow.
happens. Do you ever plug it in? Does it still work?
I have the cords, and I also have my light guns.
Ah, yes, I
I could
love
try
that.
it.
That's so
If we got a
fun.
cathode ray somewhere in a storage unit, we could give it a shot.
Man,
Ah,
the
good times.
feels. Well, what a great way to end our headlines. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, we're going to talk about the heat in the underworld with Hades 2. Plus, I have a little bit of Harold Halibut. It's all about the H games on What's Good Games this week. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to talk about what we've been playing. And if you're like the over 100,000 record-breaking Steam users for Supergiant Games, you're playing Hades 2 in early access. Congrats to the team at Supergiant. They are just a wonderful bunch of humans making really cool games. And we knew that Hades 2 was going to be fire. But I don't think even Supergiant was prepared for how many people were jumping into early access, because Hades early access certainly did not catch this much attention. But turns out when you win many, many, many Game of the Year awards, people pay attention.
Oh gosh, and rightfully so. Like, this game was announced at the Game Awards 2 years ago. The last one I was in person with you, and we were sitting next to each other when the trailer came out, and I screamed.
Yeah, you lost it. I was like, oh my God!
This was my moment. Like, oh, like Hades is this really special game to me because I historically do not like roguelikes. I never clicked with one before Hades. And when this dropped and everybody was talking about it, it was on a lot of goodies, a lot of people's Game of the Year lists. I was like, okay, fine, I'll give it a shot. And I played it and absolutely fell in love. I have countless hours of beat the quote unquote game over 50 times. There's still more that I need to discover. Like there's just so much game there. Like, it's the moment to moment action. It's the decisions you make as you upgrade your character throughout each run. It's the meta goals that you start setting for yourself to collect different power-ups and to make sure that your character's next run is even more smooth. It's the story. It's like getting to know the characters better. It's the music. It's the art. It's just like, everything is so great. Like, there's nothing about this game that isn't on 10 or even higher. And honestly, having played the technical test and now playing early access, I've got between the two maybe about 15 hours. It is even better. I don't know how, but this may be the best sequel of all time. Like, it may. It's not done yet.
My
but it may.
goodness, the best sequel of all time. Listen, that is incredibly high praise, because when I do my top 10 games of all time for Andrea Renee, like 7 of them have the number 2 in them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
twos
good
are pretty
2 games.
Mm-hmm.
But
Don't
you're
believe
saying
me.
this might
I
be the
know.
one.
I'm right there with you. Borderlands, Halo, Far Cry 3.
Mass Effect,
But, like,
Rock Band,
I'm with you. I am with
Mortal
you.
Kombat. Ugh.
It's Supergiant, y'all ate. Like, you put your whole foot in this shit. Like, this is so fucking good. Okay, I'll explain why. In Hades, you play as Zagreus. You're trying to go through all the bosses and mini bosses in hell. You finally, at the end, spoiler alert, you fight Hades, and that is not the end of the game. Like, death is only the beginning. I'm sorry, that's like a mummy quote, but you keep playing over and over again, right?
And so they really got attention for this game as a game that made the roguelike genre approachable to people like me, or to people like you who are like, hey, I'm sort of like, I could maybe be into the right roguelike game, but like this game was like, hey, let us just blow the doors off of what you think a roguelike is and show you our version of it. And I think that's what really resonated with people. So just as a reminder for people who are like, what the heck is a roguelike? Well, you guys use that term. I don't know what it means. The idea is that you have a single run and that when you die, your progression is essentially reset and you start the gameplay loop over again from the beginning. But with the way that Hades innovated with that basic formula, I think is what really got people super into the game who became like really loyal fans.
Absolutely. And the big sticking point for me when I play any game is, does it respect my time? My time has always been very valuable to me, even more so as a new mom. And even if you only get a little bit of progress, even only if you get to the first mini boss and then end up dying, you still make progression in the overall game, the overall story, your overall character development, right? So it doesn't feel like wasted time if you have a bad run, or if you get distracted and accidentally die, or if you forget to pause and then all the enemies end up swarming you. And there's a lot more enemies in this one. But what I think Hades 2 does even better, and again, it's only early access, so there's still a lot more to see, is the story builds on the original game so seamlessly. You are a relative of Zagreus and Hades and all of the characters in the first game. Without getting into too much spoilers, like, you immediately know the stakes of why this character, Melinoe or Mel, is doing what she's doing. She's fighting against time, the god Kronos. And her entire vibe for this game is witchcraft. Her mentor is the goddess Hecate. She's doing spells. There's a cauldron where you go to upgrade different aspects of your home world. Like, you're collecting different things in order to dump it into the cauldron and do a spell, and like that's how you level up certain things. You're preying on what look like tarot cards in order to increase your overall character stats for every run. This is progress that carries through, no matter if you die to an early enemy or not. You're worshiping the moon. There's just a lot of like spooky witchy vibes, which is very fun. The art is somehow even better. The characters are somehow even hotter. The voice acting is superb, and the contextual dialogue references things you just did in the past run. You maybe died to a certain enemy, and everybody in the town or your home base world references it, and they talk about what you heard from each other. Like, they talk about which gods you met while you were in that run. Like, the gods that you meet in the run talk about what you last did when you're in the home world. Like, it is just so, the dialogue trees must be absolutely insane. like it just feels like the game knows exactly what you're doing and who you are. And that's something that I appreciated in the first game, but they took it to another level in this one. There's even more content, and it's, again, early access. There's more content than the first game. How? What are you guys, like, what kind of coffee are you drinking? I don't understand this. And the combat feels even more rewarding. Like, right now I have 2 weapons. There's lots, obviously, to come, but switching between the 2 even feels good. Like, I don't even have a favorite anymore because they both feel so good. They're both so well balanced. The enemy difficulty could be dialed up for me a little bit in early access versus the technical test. I thought the technical test was really hard and I liked it. Weird for me. But in early access, it feels a little bit easy.
You're becoming one of them, Rihanna. You're becoming one of the masochists.
Maybe I got good. I don't know.
Oh,
but
or that.
It's just, it's everything I wanted and more. Like, and they're not done. Like, this is why I say it may be the best sequel of all time, because it's already better than the first one, which was one of my favorite games of all time, and in a genre that I hate. So you've transcended Hades. You've transcended Hades 2. Supergiant, I don't know how you do what you do. Please continue.
Yes, and I think they will, because they've really stayed true to their vision and their mission all of these years, and I really can't express enough like just how lovely they all are as people. Now, I haven't met every person at Supergiant, but I've met many of them, and they're all just really just lovely human beings, and
that's great,
making really cool games. And I've heard that there's a really good, positive working environment. And I hope that that's still true today. I know that things can obviously change over the years, but, you know, fingers crossed, it's still, you know, all like kumbaya over there. But I never thought that I would get into this game. And let's be real, I dragged my feet playing this game. Even after everybody around me was like, Andrea, you love Supergiant. Why haven't you played this one? I'm like, because it's roguelike. And they're like, but everybody is saying that it's real good. I go, yeah, but it's still roguelike. And then finally, I got my Steam Deck. I got Christmas, like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And of course, one of the first games I downloaded, Hades. Mm-hmm. And I was hooked. And I knew that I was gonna be, right? Because everyone said it's so good, it's so good. But so when they announced the sequel, I was like, of course, this makes sense. What a cool moment for them as a studio to be like, hey, we loved making this so much that we wanted to make another one. And the fans being like, this is what we wanted. But I will say, if you're going to be into sequels now, because like this is clearly going well for you, could I just float that Bastion 2 would be cool? Because really loved Bastion. Really would love Bastion 2. Just, you know.
Oh my God.
Planting that into the universe, and maybe someday it will grow into a Bastion-sized flower. But glad you're having fun. I just installed it, and I'm ready to start playing. But I want to remind people that Hades was in early access for almost a full year before its original retail release, before it was officially launched. So Supergiant kept that game in early access for a very long time. And obviously this game is different. They have a lot of lessons learned from the first game that they don't have to learn this time, but they're tweaking and balancing, taking community feedback. We don't know how long it's going to be in early access. A lot of dev teams like to famously say, it's done when it's done. And because they are independently owned, they can literally publish this whenever they want. And turns out people will wait for it.
Oh yeah. This isn't coming anywhere in this year.
You don't think?
Just have fun. No,
I don't know. I think that there's possibility for it to have like an official launch in like November.
I mean, they said that they have a new level that they'll be adding later this year, quote unquote. With later this year feels like fall to me, since we're already in May. So I
guess we are. Now that you say that out loud, I didn't like. Sometimes you forget that, like, oh my gosh, we're already like
the year's almost half over.
We're into the 5th month of the year, and we're almost halfway through the 5th month of the year. So yeah, okay. Now that you mentioned that, maybe Q2 2025, Q1
maybe end of Q1.
Yeah, I think like an early April release sounds great.
Spring feels great. Let's go with spring, Supergiant. That's spring.
That's good. Yeah. Cool. Well, we probably won't give too many more updates until there's like a big release, because as we mentioned, early access is a tinkering phase, and we don't want to talk about all of the tinkers, but had to get first impressions out there. So it's available now in early access. Go check it out if you are interested. I also want to talk briefly about a game that I was given access to, but is also available on Xbox Game Pass if you are a Game Pass subscriber. Thank you to Pop Agenda and the team at Slow Bros for giving me access to Harold Halibut. So this is a game we saw originally at ID at Xbox, a really great showcase that they do at GDC. And the moment that I saw this game, I was like, what is this? I need to know everything about it. It's got such a unique art style. So if you have no idea what Harold Halibut is, it's a fully handmade 2D puzzle walking sim or adventure game, if you will. I wouldn't even call it an adventure game. It's very much just like more like a walking sim. That's all in a claymation animation style. Each of these characters, their outfits, everything was handmade. The way that this team meticulously crafted the artistic visuals of Harold Halibut is not to be understated. It's truly striking and one of the most innovative styles of games I've ever seen. So that got me on the hook right away. I was like, okay, I need to know more. What's going on with this game? So at its core, Harold Halibut is about relationships and conversations and kind of exploring your world and talking to people and kind of figure out what is going on. Let me read the official blurb of the game. So people are like, I still don't understand what the game is. The quote on the Steam page is, it's a handmade narrative game about friendship and life on a city-sized spaceship submerged in an alien ocean. Join Harold as he explores a vibrant retro future world in his quest to find the true meaning of home. And what I really appreciate about this game is that the characters are also painstakingly crafted with love, and the voice acting is incredibly well done, and the music is great. And it's really more about a lot of like introspective, like, what does it all mean? What's life about? What are we doing here? Because the story of Harold Halibut is of a crew on a spaceship that is trying to find a new world to explore, and they instead get to the planet that they're like assigned to, and there's no land mass on the planet when they get there. And they're like, oh, well, so that feels like we can't stay in space forever, can't land anywhere. What do we do? So they like crash their ship into the ocean of this planet and are like submerged underwater, and they've just like kind of developed a society within this massive starship that's now like this underwater city. And you play Harold, who is like a lowly mechanic, don't really have like a super high level job, but there is like an overarching narrative that kind of sends you on like a mystery to go talk to people and unravel what's going on. But that's not the beauty of this game. The beauty of this game is the individual relationships that you form with people and the things you discover in the exploration. And I think they have really kind of opened the door to some exciting things in that regard. But I will say, I was a little bit put off by some of the actual like physicality and mechanics of how the game played. And I want to bring that up because this team took, I think, almost 10 years to fully create this game. Wow. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. There's actually been a couple cool like mini docs with the dev team about how they made this game and what it was all about. And it also leads in the wake of the big conversation around artistry and game dev and what it all means and what's worth it and what's not. It's so like hard to think of how would a team like the Slow Bros have survived if they were being funded by a big corporation. Turns out this game would have been canceled probably like 2 years in. This team clearly chose to put a lot of their resources into the artistic vision and level design of this game and not necessarily into what is the gameplay loop that is going to keep players coming back. And so I think it does feel a little bit slow to a lot of players. Some of the other like minor nitpicks I have is that it's not super intuitive how some of the controls work. There's not like a dedicated character map, and you meet quite a few people and explore quite a few places. And even though there is a sprint functionality for Harold, he's still not the fastest guy on this underwater spaceship. And so
he's not a track star, really?
No, he's not. And so I think that there's some things like that that could have been optimized a little bit better. And I love that they spent so much time doing the artistic vision, but I'm like, it would have been great if you also spent maybe a little bit more time optimizing things. Like, for example, when Harold goes to talk to somebody, if the character model in the level isn't perfectly in the right spot, it'll do one of those, I'm going to go up and then I'm going to square off to the character and turn around and then talk to the character. And it's like, oh, that feels like something that you should have fixed or optimized. And it might have something to do with the way that they have the rigging, because it's a lot of like custom animation that they're doing with the claymation, which is my guess. And, you know, if you're going to invest in these characters, you're going to like let that go by you and be like, it doesn't bother me. But I kept noticing it because, I mean, it's the year 2024. Those kinds of things you notice in a game because you don't really see those anymore, especially a game that's been in development as long as this game has. But a really interesting little title. And as I mentioned, it's an Xbox Game Pass. So if you have a subscription, it's free to try out, or it's also available on Steam. But definitely interested to see where the story goes. It's much longer than you would anticipate a game of this scope or size for an indie to be. And I think that speaks to the team's creative vision and eagerness to say, hey, we had all these ideas and we didn't really want to cut them. Now, I don't know if that editing is going to be essential when I get to the end of the story or not, because I haven't gotten to the end yet, but definitely a really cool little title.
Very cool. I might have to check this one out. It looks like a good plane game, like in long flight.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how it plays on Steam Deck, but hopefully well.
We'll have to try.
Well, there's not a lot of complicated mechanics, okay? It's like there's a couple mini games here and there, but you're mostly just traversing, doing some very light puzzle work, and then talking to a lot of people, having a lot of combos.
Yeah,
So.
I'll give it a shot. I'll let you know how it is.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Riana, for joining me to talk about both cool, exciting news and also very devastating news at the same time.
I'm here for the highs and the lows.
What a roller coaster of an episode.
We ended on a good note, though.
Yes.
There's some good games out there.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, everybody. Well, we hope that you enjoy your weekend, play a fun game, or maybe touch some grass, drink some lemonade. Celebrate your mom, everybody, because this Sunday is Mother's Day.
Yeah, it's my first as a mom with the baby.
Oh, yeah. That's so exciting. Oh, happy Mother's Day, Mama.
Thanks. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody for supporting us in our mom journey. And happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there who are fighting the good fight, making the world a better place for the future gamers of the
Thanks
earth.
for making consumers.
Yes. Yep. You know what?
Future consumers.
They're important. Someone's got to buy this stuff, right?
Yeah.
On that note, we're going to sign off. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.